In the next section, I'll show how you can create several types of action pads and trap type tokens. It's important that you know that information is stored within the library token itself. When new versions of the library token come out, you have to migrate the data from your old token to the new. I'll demonstrate how you can do that now. So once a new library token comes out, you need to rename the current token in your campaign. So locate and rename that file. I'm just going to use something simple here and use a couple of dashes. Now, once that's done, you'll probably see some error messages that come up on the chat, and that's actually okay. At this point, I'm going to drag over my new token. So this will be version 2.20, and I want to migrate from here to here. It's important that I start with this token and I transfer the action pads. It will confirm, do you want to transfer them? I'm going to say yes. And at that point, the transfer is complete. So going forward, all of my tokens that I had working before should continue to function as expected. If you don't do that process, it will lose track of all of the tokens that you have created. It's important maybe if you just don't delete these legacy tokens until you're certain everything has come over. So that is how you can migrate from one version to the next. Up until now, there hasn't been a requirement for the OnTokenMove macro. For these features within the Step-On Menu option, you will need to have OnTokenMove enabled. To review, OnTokenMove can only exist on one library token. If you have other library tokens with OnTokenMove, you will need to integrate this OnTokenMove macro with your other library tokens. Now, this is a quick demonstration of the different components within the Step-On menu option. We have a generic pad. There are some stairs up and down. There is a opaque invisibility toggle pad. There is a invisibility on-off, sort of like doormats. And then there's a series of trap tokens. So to take a look at these on the map and show you how they work, as well as some of the default features that get enabled with OnTokenMove. The first is around trees, and I can go into how you can customize trees like this, but they can have blocking layer or not, and they will automatically go opaque or invisible depending on your setting. Those settings are available through the configuration options. Other things that we have here to demonstrate, I've got a basic pad here that I can show. This is just going to kick out an audio effect when I step on, and a different audio effect when I step off. Other things I have is this is a demonstration of how roof tokens can go invisible or opaque. And these are doormat pads, and in this case I could have multiple exits. I've got multiple roofs, and I can still keep track of everything that goes on. This example would be one where I have just one toggle pad to detect if anything is under. And over here is an example of how stairs would work. So that's an example of stairs. And then over here we have several trap tokens. Traps can be as complex as you'd like them to be. I do have all the tokens that you could use. This is the trap token itself. This is what will essentially stop a token from moving. I have a detection token. This can be used for determining if you have a particular class that can detect traps. I have a trigger pad. This can be used for forcing a trigger to happen, so the trap can be in one location and the trigger can be in a different location. I also have a disable pad, meaning to say that if anything is occupying this pad, then the trap is essentially disabled. Now what's nice about some of these things is you can actually link them together. So I could link several traps together. I could have more than one trigger pad. I could have more than one disable pad. And any combination of those you can actually link together and make some pretty complicated traps. Yeah. So that's kind of a quick demonstration of the different options that we will review within the Step-On menu. Okay, this will cover trees and tree canopies and the options you can use to fine-tune or tweak how these look. The first thing is the layer these function at is the object or background layer, so do keep that in mind. And this asset I'm using here is one of the tree assets that comes with MapTool, so you can download these through the resource library options. And at this point, I'm just going to drag this to my map, and I have to set some things up, some requirements in order to make this function correctly. So I'm going to open up the properties now. And the first thing is the size cannot be free size. Due to how I detect these particular tokens, you need to set a size. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and use Colossal. And the other thing we need to do here is the tree needs to be named a particular way in order for the macros to find it correctly. So in this case, they're going to be called tree, canopy, and then some unique identifier. In this case, I'll just say DP1. I believe these tree tokens were made by Dorpin. And at this point, the tree is technically done. In fact, if I were to do a quick test here, I should be able to have that work. So that's really all that's required for the tree tokens. Now we can get fancy with this and we can add a VBL. So let's go ahead and do some of that now. If I go to my token and then select this, and I'm just going to use wall blocking and the circle option here and try to make a relatively decent circle like that. And then I need to transfer that VBL to the token, so I'll do that now. And I'm going to move VBL from the map, and I want it to erase the source. So if I do that, you should see this now show up. And I hit OK, and essentially from there it should now show that VBL in place. And if I go close to it, again the VBL will disappear and be drawn back. And that's really how easy trees are when it comes to how they can go opaque or invis. Now you'll notice, like this close, how the tree is going opaque, and that is because if you look at the actual size of the token, you'll see that I'm actually stepping on it. And there are some fine-tune options we can do in the next section in regards to adding trunks to trees in order to kind of fine-tune this part such that they can the token can get closer, like in this example, where I have a tree trunk, and you'll see that even though I'm this close, I can still have that the visualization of the tree being there. To build a quick forest, it's actually quite easy. Once you've built your tree and or tree trunk, you can really just copy and paste those about your map, and they should function as you would expect. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to select the tokens I've already configured, and I'm going to copy and just start pasting these around to kind of simulate a forest. And at that point, if I go to my token layer, all these trees should be configured and working just as I would hope. And that's how that works. So essentially making a forest and doing trees like this is actually quite easy. You might need to make some adjustments in regards to the blocking layer, because depending on your setting here, you may not be able to get close enough for you to actually disengage the canopy. So there are some tweaks in regards to the diameter of your blocking layer and some of the things that you might not be able to do in regards to making sure you're close enough to turn off the canopy, but the VBL doesn't block too much of your movement. Okay, let's get into some of the step-on menu options. The first one I'll review is this generic pad. You can set your selected tokens or custom tokens as generic pads using the same requirement of action pad and the GM name. In this example, I'm just going to use the kind of the default token. If I click on this with nothing selected, it will drop a generic pad on the hidden layer. And this is a free size token that I can move around and size to anything I want. In of itself, it doesn't do anything. So if I take a token and I kind of go across that, it's not going to do anything. This token is really used to trigger other events. So as an example, I can go into my configuration and I can add audio to it. I could add a macro to it. So I could, let's say, play a sound if someone steps onto it, or a different sound when they step off. I can also run macros against it. So if I step on the pad, I can run a check to determine if I see a secret door or can find a secret trap. So that's kind of the things that you can use these tokens for. And that should be it in regards to the generic pad. Okay, this section is going to cover the step-on invisibility toggle pad, and there's a few different ways you can implement this. The first I'll review is making the token itself an actual pad, and in order to do that, you'll need to highlight the token and make sure ActionPad is in the GM name. And if I do that, essentially, if I keep this token highlighted and now toggle or then select this, it will essentially make that pad the toggle pad. So I've just done that, and it's made the selected token an action toggle token. And what that means is if I walk into any space that the token, that the frame of the token exists within, and again, to show that, right, so anytime it walks within this kind of blue frame, it's going to make the token go opaque. So, and you can see that doesn't fit very well in regards to this particular scene because I'm not under the tent. So there are some nice things and easy things you can do to make roofs and tokens go opaque. But when it comes to oddly shaped things, you might need to customize this more, which we can do in the other settings. So we'll do that now. So in the prior example, I had shown how you can make this actual roof token, the entire token, become like a toggle pad. In this case, I'm going to drop a toggle pad that is tied to this token. So to do that, you'll notice that I do not have ActionPad in the name, and I have this token highlighted. I'm going to go to my step-on and then hit my toggle option, and you'll see a token now is dropped. This token is on the hidden layer, and I can size this token to better align or fit with the tent, such that only when I step on this token will the tent go opaque. So if you recall in the prior example, when I would step this close, the tent would go opaque, but now you'll notice that I have to get this close for the tent to go opaque. And it's really just that simple. Anytime I'm underneath this kind of toggle pad, it will make that token go opaque. So that's how you can use a custom-sized invisibility toggle pad to implement roofs. There is another option I've provided to handle tokens going invis or opaque, and we'll demonstrate that now. If I highlight the token I want to go opaque, right, so I have this highlighted, go into my step-on menu option and pick my kind of on-off pad button. This will drop two tokens down. These tokens are on the hidden layer. They are free size tokens, and they determine when you should or shouldn't see the pad go invis or opaque. So I'm just going to set these up just as a demonstration. And if I go into this, you can overlap like this, but for example, you can't have a token that's only, like, example, this. That won't work. So you need to have some sort of separation in the tokens such that they're not occupying holistically the same cells. So this would work, and essentially here's the 6 cells that will trigger my exit, and here is the cells that will trigger my entrance. So how this works, if I come into the building or room, it will essentially act accordingly. And you'll notice if I were to enter the room and then leave this way, it did not detect the exit. So there is some sensitivity in regards to how you place your entrance and exit pads. All right, that's a demonstration of how you can use these kind of doormats or on-off pads to handle opaque and invis tokens. In this example, I'll show how you can have 2 roof tokens and use 1 toggle pad. So the easiest way to set this up is, well, and to explain the scene here, I have a few things configured. I've got some vision and movement blocking down. In both of these kind of examples, we're going to focus on this. So at this time, I'm going to go to my background and select the 2 roofs that I want to be impacted by this. Once these 2 tokens are selected, I can go into my step-on and click my toggle pad. At that point, you'll see 1 token is dropped. I can go to my hidden layer and size this up. the way I want. So I think right about there and to right about there. And now when I go into that tent, as soon as I cross this kind of boundary, you'll see the tokens go invis. So again, in this case, so that's how it would work with 2 roof tokens and 1 invis pad. So that's how that would work. This will show you how you can use multiple roof tokens along with the on-off toggle pads. And once you get the understanding of how this works, you can actually create some pretty dynamic campaigns or maps due to how these pads can work together. So let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is highlight my 2 tokens that I want to go opaque. Once they're highlighted, I'm going to go into my Step-On and click my dual pad option here, and you'll see 2 tokens drop. So I'm going to place those now. And these are 2 tokens on the hidden layer that will detect when a token leaves or enters this area. So this is probably good. Now I want to have an exit, so I've got 2 openings here, and in order to do that, I'll have to essentially repeat that process. So highlight these 2 tokens again, go into my Step-On and drop 2 tokens down, and let's go in the hidden layer and let me resize these guys proper, make them cover the right areas. Excellent. Okay, so once that is done, I need to link these pads together. So to do that, I'll highlight them and then link them. Once these pads are linked, essentially they will understand and talk to each other to let them know if anyone has entered or exit this way or entered or exit that way. So this would work with multiple tokens. This option allows you to hide tokens under your roofs or your invisibility pads you've configured. Let me set the scene here. Essentially, I've got some pads already set up. This is from the prior demonstration where essentially I've got these toggle pads that are going to toggle the roofs on and off, and I have a singular pad here that does the same thing for this one roof. And essentially I'm going to set this up so when I walk in the room, these doors will appear, and when I leave the room, they disappear. So to do that, I need to select one of my pads. These are all 4 linked, but I only need to select one of them. Once that pad is selected, I can go into my configuration, select this button here, and you'll see some things change. The overlay is turned off, and I'm being asked to select some tokens, and this is set at this mode. Once I'm here, I need to go to the layer I want to affect the tokens on. In this case, these are door tokens on the object layer, and I want to add these to the invisibility pad. Okay, once that's done, you'll see the impact in a minute. It's hard to tell because we're in a GM view. I'm going to go ahead and finish the configuration over here so I can show you what this looks like. So again, I'm going to go to my hidden layer, select the pad I want to impact. I'm going to go to my button here to check invisibility, and then my tokens, and then add them. Okay, so how does this look? If I go to my player view, this is how that would look. And if I go into the room, you'll see those tokens will now appear. So that's how that would work. And similarly, and again, this might be limited use depending on your fog of war settings. You may not be able to see those tokens anyway, but this is a feature that you could do to kind of like hide or obscure tokens. All right, this next section is for stairs. Essentially, these are internal map teleports, and they're really simple to use, so I'll go ahead and drop those down on the map now. Essentially, these will be on the object layer, and it drops 2 free size tokens down that can be placed and sized really anywhere you want. Just demonstrate how these work. Let's do one here and one here. So you'll see it's kind of occupying 3 different cells, and the same thing for here. And if I walk across this part here, you'll see it will attempt to teleport me into the same location respective to where I walked on. So again, if I go on this side and I go down, it should put me on that side. But that's as simple as stairs are. So again, these are internal map teleports. I will be creating teleports that will let you go extra or external to your map in the future, but at the moment, these are the way I'm going to handle internal map teleports. This section will cover traps. I'll start off with the basics, some of the things that happen when you create a trap. And we can get started by using the Step-On Menu option and using this button. This button will either take a selected token and make it a trap, or in this case, I'm just going to create a token on the hidden layer. If you selected a token and have it configured, you will essentially send that token to the hidden layer as well. And the same actions will take place that I'm about to show you here. First, the token will have a new group created called ActionPads, and on that group, or in that group, we'll have 3 macros. These macros are respective to the same features I will show you here. So first, this is the default state the trap is in. This is the hidden state. The trap is on the hidden layer. And if I click this button, this will trigger the trap. And this then shows that the trap has been triggered and exposed. In this state, the token is moved to the object layer and made visible. However, the default tokens here, these particular images, will not be made visible. So the only tokens that really get made visible in this example will be the selected tokens. I'm going to go ahead and reset it. Also, you can use the tokens on trap. This will essentially tell me who triggered and or is on the trap, and again is respective to the macro here. So to show how this works, I'm going to move this here and select the token layer, and I'm just going to move this PC token across the trap, and essentially that's what happens. So the token really just stops wherever the trap is, and if I go over it again, so that's really what happens. That's the default response to any token that moves over the trap. Now, when the player has done that, you can go to the object layer, because again, when a trap is activated, it moves to the object layer. So now I can select the trap, and you can see the trap's been triggered, and I can also check to see what tokens were hit by the trap. And in this case, I ran over it a couple times here, so it does show the 3 times that my example token went over the trap. And if I reset it and then check again, you'll see that it's back to 0. And again, the token gets moved to the hidden layer. So how this looks from a player. So again, this is what the player would see if they drag across that. Again, a player wouldn't actually see this token. If I were to look at this, you'll see that it is visible to owners only, and essentially, even though it is visible to players, typically the GM would be the only player to actually see this. Okay, so that's kind of the basic ins and outs of traps and how the foundation is created. From this, we can go into more trap options. Using a custom token and making it a trap. So I have some example tokens here. Again, I'm going to use a simple token. So this is, I think, a token from 2-Minute Tabletop. Again, another resource I use frequently for different examples, as is this background. And what I'm going to do is essentially make this an active trap and then give it some audio and show how that works. So the first thing I need to do is configure it for a trap. Oh, that's right. I have to do the action pad in the GM name. Again, as a safety, now I can configure it as a trap, and just like the simple trap example, I have the same features, and you'll see the same token or a macro group gets created. I'm going to now add some audio to this, and let me get this pulled up. And I have this saved already, so when you step on the trap, I want to make that sound. And let's move the trap into place. Oops. Now, as I explained before, when we're using this default image, that trap won't be made visible to players. So to show how this works in a player view example, so they come across the bear trap, and there you should hopefully get some audio there, and that's essentially the simple way of how a trap would work. And to check the status of that trap, again, I can go to the object layer, select my trap, see what tokens are on it, and again, same sort of thing. I ran across it 3 times or triggered it, and I can now reset the trap. and it will go back to the hidden layer. Turn off the player view. So again, that's a example of how a simple trap is created using a custom token. One option you can add to your trap is a detection pad. I suppose the most used case for this is if you have a class that has detect traps or some other skill where traps can be detected without actually setting them off. So to do that, you'll highlight your trap token and use this button here. This is the add detect option. This creates a token on the hidden layer just right or east of your trap token. This is a free size token that I'm going to kind of size up to consume these 9 cells around the trap. And the token in of itself does not do anything. You need to add some logic behind this in order for it to detect the trap. So to do that, I'm going to go into my macro option here, and I have some eval macro compliant text that I'm going to use for this. This essentially will set the, let's see here, I'm using a difficulty class of 20. I'm reading the wisdom property off of the token. I'm using a variable called myself. That is to mean any token that walks over this is myself. And then I'm rolling a d20, doing some math, and trying to determine if I could detect the trap or not. The most important part is to make sure that you return in a 2, 1, or 0. Anything other than that may result in your trap not functioning as you expect. Okay, once that's in there, I can go to my token layer, and as this token has a wisdom of 15, so it won't necessarily score every time, but at the moment I am hard coding some text to chat that essentially says this. So-and-so senses something is essentially what will happen if they detect the trap when they go over it. Not every time they go, although he's getting pretty lucky here, but not every time that they move over will they necessarily detect. How this looks in a player view is essentially just like this, and that's how detect traps would work. Another option with traps is to add an additional trigger plate, and you can do that similar to the detect pad. I'll highlight my token, my trap token here, and select my add trigger. This will drop a token south or down from your selected trap token. This is another free size token, and essentially I can move this anywhere, and what will happen is that any token that goes over this trigger pad will trigger the trap. Now there are some options you can do with this in this configuration, get your trap selected. In this configuration option, I can trigger the trap a max number of counts. This tells me the current count that it's on, and I can say, do I want to trigger on the trap itself, or do I want to trigger on just the trap? So these are some options that you can kind of play with depending on how you want these to go. Right now I'm just going to leave the defaults. Okay, so how this works is essentially if I go to the player view, and in this case I go here, and if I cross this token, you'll see the trap is essentially triggered and set off. So that's how you could essentially have a remote, maybe a pitfall trap or some other kind of trap that can be triggered remotely. Another option you have available is a disable pad. Essentially, any token occupying a disable pad will disable the traps and triggers. So to do that, you'll highlight your trap and use this button here to add a disarm. This token will essentially get created just southeast of your selected token, and you can move this. It's a free size token. Move and size it however you like. And essentially how it works is like this. If I take a token and occupy that pad, any actions across my traps essentially won't work. So it will, in effect, disable the pad. The moment I walk off that, my triggers and my traps still function at that point. So again, when you're on the pad, no triggers, oops, went too far. No triggers will, and traps will be triggered. So that's how a disable pad functions. There are several ways you can animate a trap. I'm going to go through the rotation options in this example. So what I have is a token. It's a token set to large. It's sitting at the hidden layer, and I've only just configured it for a trap. I've not done anything else to it. I've just highlighted the token and clicked my trap option. At this point, I can go into my configuration and I have a few different animation options. This is the default, which is no animation. This setting is if I had a pre-recorded path, and I haven't done that here. I'm going through rotation. This is if I want to rotate to the left and if I want to rotate to the right. So let's go through this one and to demonstrate how that would look. This is the player view. And that's an example of what would happen in this case. Now, you can check what's been hit by this token or this trap, and essentially what happens when you put rotation on a trap, every essentially 360 degrees, so full rotation, it does a check to see if it is hitting any new targets. So if I go on my tokens on trap, you'll see that I've hit it that token several times. This is really, again, for visual purposes. If I have enough feedback or maybe a change request, I can certainly change the behavior of how this collects information when it strikes a trap or strikes a token. But this is the technique I'm kind of using at the moment for rotation. In this example, I'll show how we can use that rotation animation along with linking traps together to show some kind of neat effects. So this is the trap token we had just used. It's already kind of set up for animation, if you recall. And this is a trap token I haven't configured yet. So I'll set that up now. And trap token's done. Now let me get some animation to it. Okay, so those two pieces are done. I've got two trap tokens, and now I want to link these trap tokens together. What that means is any trap that's linked will trigger the other trap. So it works this way. I'm going to select these two tokens, go to my configuration option, and link the two together. So at this point, if I go to my player view, right, and if I give a demonstration of how this would look, I go across the trap. So you'll see both traps get triggered even though I only walked across one. And let that finish. Just to demonstrate that again, I can walk across this. And again, both traps get triggered. So that's an example. How this looks when you see who struck the trap, they should report the same information. So you'll see there's several hits here, and also here you'll have the same kind of hits. So they share their hit list, and just something to keep in mind when you've linked these traps together. There's an additional feature you can use to animate traps if you want them to go a certain path. This uses a feature within the toolbox menu. I haven't shown that yet, but I will in a future video. Due to how this is connected to traps, though, I figured it would be worthwhile to at least do a demonstration of animating traps. So to set the scene here, what I have is I have the two traps from the first couple videos where I've animated these rotationally, and I've tied them together so they're linked. At this point, I want to add some additional animation to them. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and select my token, use the toolbox menu here, and this is the recording feature or a movie maker option. And what this does is it first will set the token to prepare for animation. And at this point, it tells me where I want the animation to start. So I want the animation to start here, and I want to go to here, and it should actually walk that path. So that's a demonstration of how that would work. But I'm not done. I'd like to go ahead and continue that and say I want to now take that trap, and I want to continue to animate it. And I want to continue to animate it. I want to go from where it is now, so from here, all the way to here. And finish. And then I want one more thing where I want to kind of send it back to its home position. So I'll do that now. The trap's highlighted. I'm going to trigger the movie maker. This is where I want the token to start. And this is about where I want the token to end. So that's an example of how I can animate that particular trap. I'm going to do the same steps for this trap here. And I'll do it slightly, slightly in reverse order. So in layer, toolbox, set it for a movie, start my movie. I want it to go to here and stop. And then select my trap, and I want to go from this point all the way to this point. And then last, I want to go from the point it's at right now, so starting from here and then going to right about there. It will play back each part of the paths that you've recorded. It's just how I combine those together, and it also will provide kind of a cleaner view. Now, when you've set traps like this, there's a few other macros and things that happen. First, I add 2 additional macros to the ActionPads group. This is to play the movie, which will essentially animate that trap just like we saw. You can also remove the movie. So if, for example, you messed up and you wanted to start over, if you just click this, it will delete it, and essentially no movie will exist and you'll have to start from 0. So that's an example of how you can program animation into these traps. Let's see how that looks in the player view. So let me reset these 2 traps and go to the player view. Okay, so this is how that would work. Let's move this guy forward a little bit, and we'll go ahead and trigger the traps. And as these traps kind of go across, they should share each of the information that they hit. Hopefully this works. And you'll see that it does, so it's got both the fighter that it hit as well as the cleric that this one hit. So that's kind of how those traps get tied together, as well as how the animation can work. Linking and other tricks you can do with traps. So up to this point, I've shown how you can link these 2 physical traps together, but you can also do other features. For example, if I highlight my 2 traps, reset them both here first. So if I highlight these 2 traps, I still have my options I can pick. So when I have 2 or more traps selected, or 1 or more traps selected, I should say, and I choose these options, these tokens will be tied to those specific traps. So not so much the detect, because that is really just a generic pad that you're running a macro against, but the trigger pad and the disable pad will be connected to the selected traps you've got. So as an example, if I drop one of these down, you'll see it's in this southeast corner of the trap. And if I drop one of these down, this will essentially trigger both traps. Now in this case, these traps are linked, and it may not be the best of examples, but the point remains that if I have unlinked traps and I drop these tokens with multiple traps selected, they are connected. So again, this trigger pad would set off both of these traps independently, and similarly, this disable pad will disable both of traps because I had them both selected when I created this pad. So that's some of the neat ways you can use to create trigger pads or disable pads and link things together and create some pretty complicated and visually appealing traps.